So what it was a game jam, but it was built around sort of something a little bit different than most game jams, and it was bringing together developers and researchers, and specifically researchers in the neuroscience space. And we brought them together, and basically the idea was, what can these two groups do together? Because they're sort of groups that don't necessarily mix all the time. And it was sort of like, what can neuroscientists, the problems they're working on, what can they bring to the development space? And then also from the development side, like people with experience with VR, what can they bring to sort of the neuroscience perspective? And this was put together by Games Change, but also just really quick shout out to Hewlett-Packard, who supplied a lot of the technology for us. The backpacks you've been sort of seeing around Immersive Arcade, that's what we used. So like it drove the jam. Also, we partnered with Engaged Learning Network, sort of a network of neuroscientists, and also Carnegie Mellon, where I teach. I'm a teacher at the Entertainment Technology Center. We help supply resources and time to make this all go. And we brought together a bunch of jammers. We had 8 researchers, 44 developers from a pretty wide range of areas and backgrounds. And we had them jam. So a jam is this dense moment of development and creativity and thinking. So we had 8 teams. We had 2 days. We had a lot of technology. So as it has appeared, 2 EEGs, 4 platforms. We had Vive lighthouses sprouting up everywhere. We had fun with wireless stuff. And we made a bunch of cool things. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through 4 of those. But like I said, we had 8 teams. And so I wanted to do a quick recap of some of the other stuff that was made and some stuff you'll see. So we had a team make an experience called 7 Doors, which was sort of using VR to create an environment to help deal with sort of intense feelings and how to cope with that. We had a team who will actually be talking today, working on SenseScape, which is actually looking at how to use VR to possibly help diagnose concussions. We had a team make something called Me, Myself, and I, which was looking at embodiment, but also specifically what could you design in VR with the possibility of putting it in fMRI. We had a team looking at doing something called Beyond Reach, which was taking the idea of being in VR and the physical actions you go through and how might that change your reaction to social issues and how you might think about something if you are experiencing it. Another team that we'll be presenting today was looking at using augmented reality and looking at using it to help guide people on the autism spectrum through exercises around eye contact. We had another team that was looking at the idea of a Skinner box and what might it mean to make sort of a human scale one in VR, and what could that mean for research and what might you do with that. They didn't actually have a pigeon. Another team who will be presenting today as well was looking at actually detecting brainwaves and what could you do with that and use for a digital experience. And then our last team was looking at VR and in sort of, again, in the sense of embodiment and perspective, but this time with an eye towards what if you are dealing with robots and thinking about safety, how might different perspectives give you the ability to like monitor that and work with that. So sort of like that quick recap of the whole jam experience. I'm going to hand it off to the teams, and they're going to walk through sort of what they did and sort of what ideas they're working with and give you a better sense of what the whole jam thing was like. So with that, I hand it off to SenseScape.
My name is Kurt. I'm the CEO of Mikuni Games. We're a small team of indie game developer here based in New York. We've been making, family-friendly mobile games for the past 5 years. Some of you might heard our game called Kitty in the Box. So that's one of our biggest franchise which has received over 10 million of downloads from worldwide. Personally, I'm a big fan of Games for Change. I've been involved on the advisory board, trying to bring in my resource from developing games in VR and AR, trying to bridge the contact to this amazing organization. And I've been a big fan of VR Brain Jam from the very beginning, and this is a year I'm very proud to be involved again. that's all the back info. So the project we made this year is called SenseScape. It's immersive sensory processing challenge. So it's based on our partner John Fisher's research in. So I'll have John take it from here.
Thanks a lot, Kurt. This was a really awesome experience for me to really partner with people who could create technology that I think could help move neurotherapeutics along. So I'm really happy with what we were able to create this year. So the problem we are addressing, let's see if, should I stand over here? The problem we're addressing is concussion and brain injury. So brain injury, traumatic brain injury, is a leading cause of death and disability for people under the age of 45. So there's a lot of game-playing people under the age of 45. So now we know that for severe brain injury, you can usually see findings on clinical imaging. So in the CAT scan, for example, there we go. In CAT scan, you can see hematoma or diffuse damage to white matter. But for 80% of these injuries, the scans look completely clean. And that is because of a variety of mechanisms that we don't really understand. How does impact affect the neurons and their functioning? And this is a real problem in terms of real life performance and employment. So if there's no actual symptoms, if you can't actually show your employer stuff, how can you convince someone that you need time off, that you need compensation? But also in terms of therapy, if your doctor is prescribing you with medication, how do you actually know if things are getting better if you can't necessarily see things? So rather than focusing on kind of local injury, just damage to tissue at one particular place that you got hit, it's important to remember that when you get hit in the head, the mechanical shock really penetrates all sorts of structures on all sorts of scales, from the gross structures down to the fibers and up to the neurons. So actually, these are real imaging assets imported into the engine UniView, not Unity. It's for space and stuff like that. So rather than rely on clinical imaging, we're interested in possibly using function as a readout. So when there's something wrong with your car, when your car breaks down, it's not always apparent by looking at the engine, but what you experience it by noticing that the car doesn't work so well through function there. So people who have brain injury and other conditions, one of the most difficult tasks is sensory processing tasks. And a classic example is the cocktail party effect. So here's a little depiction of a cocktail. This is you. I mean, this is Brad, but this is you, for example. And you're talking with a bunch of people, and you're able to, if you have healthy hearing and healthy multisensory processing, you're able to attend to a single person at one time. So here's a person you're talking to. Oh my God, Brad, you always wear that shirt. Good for you. But you're also able to kind of tune out other background noises and listen in on other salient information that's possibly more relevant to you in your next behavioral steps. However, if you have injury and you have tough time with this kind of thing, this is going to be you. This is going to be your personal hell because you're actually not able to tune out these things. Now, sensory processing can be tested in a laboratory setting, in a clinical setting. There's speech-language pathology techniques and stuff, and equivalents for other sensory modalities. But it's important to note that these experiences often are specific to real-life social events. So we decided to come up with an experience, a virtual reality game where we could literally place someone in a virtual cocktail party effect. So you have the job of wandering through a crowd of people and looking to find the person who you're talking, who's interested in talking to you and has some salient information. I'll show you. You'll see a screen grab. You'll see a video sample of that next. Now, while you're making your way through this crowd, the game actually logs your trajectory that you take through the crowd. And so meandering in one area is kind of an indication of you maybe having a tough time parsing out things if that is not where the target is. And this is similar to an approach that basic neuroscience research takes to looking at various disorders. For example, here's a movie looking at the motion of a mouse moving through a cage, and these trajectories, these maps will change based on the health condition, based on medications delivered there. So here we go. Right. So in our implementation that we did at the Brain Jam, we also add an additional modality measuring the electroencephalogram, EEG, using a mobile device here. So not only were we monitoring trajectories through the crowd, but we were also logging, much as this fine fellow here is wearing everything at the same time, we were also logging the brain waves there. And so we have both the behavioral and the kind of objective brain activity with which one can do processing and possibly classify different states of brain condition. So here is a video example of what it's like to be to walk through. Oops, sorry, we skipped by one thing. Yeah. So not only can we use the EEG to also help diagnose, but we envision a therapeutic mode where that EEG information is used real time to present visually to you. If you are someone who has trouble with sensory processing and tuning out irrelevant information, you have a cute character that is showing you visual representations of various aspects of your brainwaves, focusing on components that scale with attention. So our little cute character here is called, he's a representation of rain bear, which is a combination of a reindeer and a bear. Here is one scene, for example, where you are in a many talker, multiple talker situation. You're at a campground here, and you are trying to walk. You're listening in on various conversations, and you need to find the person who's saying something of importance to you. So, hey stranger, I got something for you there. So you found the person, and they are going to give you a reward and teleport you to a next scene. And in our implementation here, we've made sure that there's lots of Seinfeld jokes that they're telling in our city bar scene there. So in terms of where we see this going, we actually envision that this might be, this is a good candidate for example, an FDA approved video game for therapeutic and diagnostic purposes. So thanks to the 21st Century Cures Act, there's actually more precedent and kind of a more streamlined regulatory mechanism for taking things like software, which is actually a form of medical device, to market for certain indications. And so there's applications beyond traumatic brain injury, such as ADHD. And so I think that there's kind of a bright future ahead of us for these using games for therapy and diagnosis, yeah. So we'll see what the future holds for us. So thank you.
Hi. So my name is Evan. I'm a neuroscientist currently working at York College with Robert Duncan. My mentor is right over there. We study virtual reality and the neural correlates associated with it. And this is my first experience at the Game for Change event, but the project we worked on is titled Me, Myself, and I. So we study the experiences associated with virtual reality, and current literature suggests that this idea of bodily self-consciousness is something that's directly affected by virtual reality. And bodily self-consciousness is essentially the cumulative integration of multisensory signals, including vestibular, visual, auditory, proprioceptive, and others that are integrated in any given moment in time to kind of represent this global representation of self. Again, current literature says that bodily self-consciousness is the result of embodiment and presence. Embodiment being the perception of inhabiting a real or virtual body. So here the study, the person in green is where you feel this sense of embodiment. Embodiment is directly correlated with the orientation and position of a virtual arm or virtual extremity. And then presence is this sense of location, with the perception of being at a particular location. This is normally induced with HMDs, where they essentially, original paradigms, you'll stroke your back while you actually see a camera of a virtual avatar being stroked the same manner. And with this visual tactile synchronicity, you create this illusory perception of that you're translocated in a different space. So current literature suggests that subjective experiences of embodiment and presence are associated with distinct neural networks. I won't go into detail because there are a lot, but as you see there, while there's some overlap, it's still unknown whether these are distinct or actually correlated networks. So that's one of the ultimate objectives of my research, my lab's research. So what are we trying to do? fMRI stands for functional magnetic resonance imaging. And what it does is basically measure the brain activity associated with certain behaviors that are performed while people are in these magnetic coils. And if you see here, these giant magnetic coils are very limited in mobility. So what we wanted to do is create a game that can actually measure the differences between these experiences in an fMRI limited mobility setting. Does anyone else want to continue?
Hi, so I'm Lena. I was one of the designers working on this. And so basically, because of the limited mobility, we needed to make sure that we had the experience was very well thought of in terms of how we interpret, how we use the the equipment. What kind of equipment do we use? What kind of game do we create? What kind of experience do we create? Because we needed to make sure that it's all very tailored towards our end goal. Also, we wanted to make sure that we were able to measure what we wanted to measure. So in terms of the experience itself, we needed to create a very minimalistic experience in a way without making it too boring, because we wanted to make sure that we're really able to focus on the different variables that we wanted to measure, and we wanted to make sure that we're really measuring what we wanted. So basically, the subjects, right now, you were able to demo if anyone tried standing up, but basically we're planning for it to be in a lying down in an fMRI machine when you have very limited movement, and your right arm, your right hand will control the right hand of your own avatar, while your left hand will control the right arm of your mirror avatar. So it's kind of playing with your sense of embodiment and your sense of presence in a very controlled way.
So I'm Greg Yarby, Game Design and Development, Quinnipiac University. And given the constraints that Lena just described, we wanted to create a playful experience. And we all recall from some of our earliest days that, well, we wouldn't articulate it this way, but play is a form of exploring and discovering how the world works. So we needed to reduce the play to this highly constrained action. And so we came up with this simple stacking mechanic. And what's interesting is that it is really collaborative, at least in this iteration. You collaborate with yourself. First, your right hand, first person avatar, and then you use your left hand to control the right hand of the third person experience. And we also have sort of a God's eye, third person omniscient view, which we'll see. So you collaborate with yourself, or if you need some theme music, think of Billy Idol's Dancing with Myself.
Hi, my name is Radian, and I'm the Unity developer. So what we've created is, we've created two characters here. So the first character have the IK solver for the right hand connected to the right controller. So now when you're moving your right hand, you can see your right hand will just move just the way it's supposed to move. And then we created another system for the second character in front of you, which is inverted on the x-axis. And the IK solver on that right hand will grab the data from the controller from the left controller. So now when you move your left controller, it'll just mirror what it's doing in front of you. So we also add, for the mobility issue, we also added a little bit of a extract and retract system where you can just slide your thumb touchpad back and forth to actually move the hand in and out. So if you're restricted with your movement, you can just use your thumb to actually have the hand extended out. And then, since we created that system for the second character, we can just copy that and duplicate it for the third God's eye view, where you're still controlling the two characters from where you're looking at, moving your both right hands off the two characters down.
So again, what we want to measure here is this attention switching almost. In these studies, we'd pair the fMRI data with actual behavioral reports. So we'd ask subjects while they're experiencing these situations, how embodied did you feel in the first-person perspective while you were making this block game? And how embodied were you in the avatar directly in front of you? And we want to compare those experiences with the fMRI data that we acquire. This is the presence experience where ideally you feel present from this omniscient perspective, but you're still controlling the avatars as if you would in the normal perspective. Ideally, again, what we want to do is measure these experiences and really disentangle these subjective experiences in fMRI. Ideally, using these, understanding the subjective experiences involved with virtual reality can, hopefully with fMRI data, we can identify specific regions that govern both of these subjective experiences. And ideally, if you can find regions that are associated with specifically virtual reality, we can create applications that target these regions in the future. And just one last tidbit, one of the things with this limited mobility that we have incorporated into our experiment, this experiment could be used to test embodiment and presence in subjects and patients with limited mobility, which could also be helpful for understanding their experiences as well. Yeah, so this is the rest of our team. Again, I know we're out of time, but we all want to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our experience. I hope you had a chance to try our demo.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming today. So I'm going to talk about our project Head On. My name's Mark Coutange. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and I direct a lab there looking at learning, memory, and perception, looking at how we learn information, how it gets integrated into brain systems, which often involves memory systems and perception. Yeah, so that's what we do, what I do. And today, I'll talk about our work where we are developing an augmented reality application to encourage and help individuals on the autism spectrum make eye-to-eye contact. And so before we go into that, this is our team here. I was the kind of cognitive neuroscientist on the team, and as you can see, we had 3 other developers. Really, we didn't know each other that well before. Some people met on Twitter, other people met when we were there. So it really was a great way to get lots of different expertise. And I'll be passing on to Saul in a second soon to talk about the technical aspects. But the problem that we addressed is the fact that individuals on the autism spectrum often don't make much eye contact, to have direct eye contact with people. In fact, someone on our team actually happened to have 3 relatives, and it was something very close to her. And she sort of confirmed that this is something that really can be quite difficult, not just for the individual, the kid, but for the families as well. And so what happens is that when often, not all, but some kids with autism spectrum disorder, when they do make direct eye contact, it can be very overstimulating, very aversive. There's a neurobiological basis for this. There's a structure that we all engage when we make direct eye contact, known as the amygdala. But when that becomes over-responsive, which we think might be happening in these kids and adults, then that direct special eye-to-eye contact, when you make direct gaze, it just becomes a lot, becomes too much, and the kids will often end up looking away. And that's a barrier because if this happens a lot during development, they miss out on critical exposure to social interactions, right? We develop our social skills through exposure time, through making eye contact and interpreting what people are saying. And it's also a bit of an impediment and a barrier to social bonding because eye contact is a key thing. So it's important both for the kids and for families. And so our objective was to develop and use augmented reality as a way so that down the road, certainly, kids would be able to actually literally effectively have assistance or scaffolding in order to help them look their family and friends in eye to eye. So I'll hand over now to Saul, who'll tell us about what we did.
Hi, my name is Saul. And to address this problem, we created an augmented reality app for iOS. We developed the app in Unity, and we use ARKit 2.0. So the goal of this app is the goal of the app was to use the device to use eye tracking, and also we would give it to the kid, so the kid would look at another person in front of the phone, and we would use the app to eye track and see if they monitor their movement. We would monitor the movement of their eyes to see if they would be able to look at the other person's eye. So what we did, we created a robot's face, because kids that are on the spectrum seem to like cartoon images. They seem to consider them more friendly than human faces, so it's easy for them to look at them at the eyes. So we had a robot face, and we put it in front of augmented it in front of the in the real person's face. And when the kid was maintaining eye contact with the robot's face, we would slowly fade away the 3D model of the robot to show the real person. And through this practice, we would train them and condition them to slowly be more comfortable with looking at another person's face. So for example, this is the robot that was designed. It would be showcased in front of another person's face. And as the kid would look at the robot's face, it would slowly fade away. And the face would fade away in different sections, different parts. And at the end, they would be able to see the actual person through their device. These are pictures of the device that we actually built. Because this is only a prototype, we are only able to access the front camera to use the eye tracking, and we use a picture of another person instead of actually getting a live feed. As you can see, the red ball indicates where the app is detecting the eye tracking to be. And if they look at the eye section on the person, you'll see how the face slowly fades away. We also use stars as an additional encouragement to keep the kids looking at the eye section. So some of the challenges and lessons learned during this experience, one of them was to find and create an adequate model to use in front of to put in front of the person's face. We tried to create a model that was appealing to kids on the spectrum. Also, ARKick 2 was just released 2 weeks ago, so we had a lot of interesting moments experimenting with it and how to integrate that with Unity. Some potential next steps would be to finish integrating the back end of the camera, so we can access both cameras to do the face tracking on the person the kid is looking at. Also, increase and add different rewards for the kid that the parents would be able to design. So if the kid is able to maintain eye contact for extended periods of time, the parents could be able to give them customizable rewards that are more appealing to them, as well as collect data based on the kid's performance and see how easy it is for them to maintain eye contact and how fast they are progressing. And that would be useful information for the parents. Yeah, I think that's it for us. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Imalik Njai. This is Elena. We are part of the team from Bent Spoon. So we are doing some mind-bending activities. The idea is to create a platform where normal controllers are replaced with just thinking about what you want to do on a video screen in VR or any other sort of media and just have it happen. So our team is composed of 3 different specialties. So I'm the CEO of Neurostorm Studios, which is a scrappy little startup here in New York City. We have neuroscientists in the team from 3 different Nobel Prize labs here in New York, Columbia, Cornell, and Rockefeller. So we took care of the neuroscience part of what we're about to show you. We also had SolidWorks, which is one of the leading companies in AR and VR in industrial settings. So they design airplane engines and other things way beyond my pay grade. And lastly, we have Ubisoft, which Elena is part of. So Ubisoft makes AAA titles like Assassin's Creed and lots of other titles I'm sure many of us know about. And also the new South Park game.
Right. So our main idea was that you can potentially use your brain to interact and control game environments without using an actual controller. So how did we go about doing that? So we had EG. So we had an EEG headband called Muse that basically detects 5 types of brainwaves. And we started using that to collect samples and data from my brain. My brain was the test bed for this project. And we used 2 different states. Basically, one was complete relaxation, not thinking about anything, and gathering the brainwaves information from that state. And the other one was intensely focusing on an object and trying to interact with it as much as possible. Like we had an apple that we used as a test where I could focus on the weight of the apple, the weight field in my hands, just to get that diverse brainwave information. And I'll let Imalik talk more about the data.
So there's multiple types of brain waves that you could get out of EEG data. So we looked at these and saw that there were very much differences amongst them depending on what activity like Elena is engaged in. So here's just a quick example of her engaged with conceptualizing and imagining the physicality of the apple. The gamma and alpha waves are similar, while if she goes into a more relaxed meditative state, you see that there's a difference in the alpha and gamma. And this is just one example of some of the future differences we see in the brainwave data. So with the Muse device, we were able to get this data and live feed it into Unity, and we designed a custom algorithm to sort of read this data. And this is just a very early version of this algorithm. Basically, it's a bucket filling algorithm where you look at the strength of the particular brainwaves we focus on over time, and as time progresses, if the brainwaves are associated with a particular threshold, then it gives like a command to do an action, right? So, so now we have a narrative of it being a mischievous cat to apply this algorithm.
Right. So we wanted to use as a test example for this universal controller, like a game, to put some narrative behind it. So we had this idea of being a mischievous cat that's trying to keep on breaking objects in a house and interacting with them, and that would eventually end up bending a spoon, of course. And after bending the spoon, it would kind of see its reflection in it and realize that it's a cat. That was the story. So yeah, the really cool thing about it was that the whole interaction with the object was real time. So I could see when I was trying to do it that I was like concentrating or it wasn't working quite well, and I was trying to focus more and more on it.
So yeah, we were able to do all of that work in 48 hours. This is very much early work. And so we have lots of next steps to do. The team is very much engaged across Neuroscience Studios, SolidWorks, as well as Ubisoft. So next we will go ahead and learn more about the EEG data. So apply some neural nets, artificial intelligence to detect different features of different brain states. Each of these could be then assigned to different bindings, which are then buttons that you would have in a classic controller. And so hopefully be able to have a more natural interaction with controllers, with gaming, and something that's accessible to folks of different capacities. So can you go to the next one? So this is our team. Just wanted to say it's really wonderful. Like, the power of what we're doing comes truly from the diversity of the team. You put together neuroscientists, VR technicians, as well as game designers. You really don't know what could happen, and we were completely impressed by everything that happened within our group, and just seeing everybody else in the XR Jam.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's even though like we went for the most obvious bend the spoon idea, we can see the potential it has, and there are definitely other avenues to explore there. That's it.
Thank you.
It's a good place to sort of go to the end. So actually, one thing that was noted was this was the second year we did this. We did this last year as well. And if you're interested, we're hoping to do it again next year. We've put an interest form up on the website. But this whole experiment has been about bringing people together. But so like some of it has been like, oh, what could you actually do? How can we take this with research? But I think another big part of this was sort of also the spirit of like Games for Change. So we have these different communities, getting people to connect together and making those connections. And one of the things we hope is that the connections that were made at this jam last, that the email connections continue, that maybe there's chances for some of the researchers to say, oh, like, I'm going to pursue some grant funding to make this happen, or like, now I understand what it might mean to make this into a real thing. And maybe the developers are thinking, maybe, you know, Assassin's Creed isn't the thing I should be working on. I should be going for the big money in research. But all kidding aside, we're really excited about what we've been doing here, and like the potential that shows. And actually, the thing I think that we're really excited about is just the reaction to people in the jam. I think everyone, I think, had a good time. So like I said, if you're interested in this stuff, please reach out, and we're going to see if we can do it again next year. And with that, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to sort of like answer them, and like the team would be happy to answer questions as well. But thank you very much for coming.